Picture a rain-soaked evening in 1878 Colorado, where a lone cowboy, Burt Delaney, knelt by the raging Arkansas River, pressing life back into a stranger's lifeless chest. He thought he'd saved an Apache woman from death's grip, but her dark eyes, waking to meet his, held a secret heavier than the flood. Now, she shadows him, 30 feet away, silent, unyielding, like a debt he never agreed to pay. One eagle feather, two worlds colliding, and a town ready to burn them both to end a curse. Will Burt outrun the river's pull, or lose everything to a debt carved in blood? This story's ending has left millions breathless. Stay to uncover why a single choice reshaped the frontier's heart. Hit subscribe, share your city in the comments, and let's unravel this mystery together. What's waiting at that river's edge? You'll want to know. The Arkansas River roared like a beast unchained, its muddy waters churning with broken branches and upstream debris, clawing at the banks of Colorado's frontier in the waning monsoon of 1878. Burt Delaney, a lanky cowboy of 28, rode his mare along the sodden trail, his hat brim heavy with rain. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, sharp enough to cut. He didn't see the woman fall, only a hand, pale against the dark current, thrashing in the river's infamous whirlpool, a stretch locals shunned for its history of swallowing souls. Instinct kicked in. Burt leapt from his saddle, boots sinking into the mud, and plunged into the icy torrent. The water slammed him, cold as a grave, but he fought through, seizing her limp form. Her lips were blue, her chest still. On the bank he knelt, pressing hard against her ribs, like he'd done years ago for a young soldier in a dusty skirmish. Water gurgled from her mouth. A faint pulse flickered. She was Apache, her dark hair plastered across a face carved sharp by the land. Burt exhaled, thinking he'd done the one right thing in this brutal country. 3 days later, he was mending a fence under a gray sky when he felt eyes on him. There she stood, outside the wooden corral where he tied his cattle, exactly the length of his lasso rope, 30 feet. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, her black eyes steady as a hawk's. Burt squinted, wiping sweat from his brow. "You lost," he called. No answer. Her buckskin dress swayed in the breeze, but she was rooted, a statue of flesh and bone. He stepped closer. She stepped back, precise as a shadow, keeping that invisible line taut. Unease coiled in his gut, but he turned back to his work, hammer pounding wood. She was there the next day, and the next, always 30 feet, no closer, no farther. Burt tried approaching once, his boots crunching gravel, but she glided backward, smooth as a deer, her gaze never breaking. At the market she trailed him, dodging wagons and townsfolk, always at that cursed distance. Whispers spread like wildfire. Mrs. Patterson, the storekeeper, leaned over her counter, voice low. "That Apache girl's trouble, Burt. Her kind don't linger without cause." He shrugged it off, but the weight of her stare followed him home. One night, under a moon sharp as a blade, Burt found an arrow sunk into the ground by his well. An eagle feather, tied to the shaft, fluttered in the dark. His cattle grew restless, pawing the dirt, refusing feed. Sleep came hard. He dreamed of his father, gunned down in '65 for stopping a mob's noose, blood pooling on the saloon floor while a boy Burt watched, helpless. The memory clawed at him, whispering that saving a life out here was never clean. By the 5th day, the town's murmurs turned sharp. Old Henry Clarkson spat tobacco at the saloon, growling, "She's marking you, Delaney. Apache don't play games." Burt had enough. At dawn, he strode out to where she stood, her silhouette stark against the rising sun. "Why are you here?" he demanded, voice rough as gravel. She didn't flinch. For the first time, her lips parted, her voice low, clear, cutting through the morning chill. You saved the wrong person. She pointed to the river, to a lightning-scarred cottonwood etched with old knife marks, half hidden by reeds. I was chosen to die, to end a debt, blood for blood, from years back when a white man, saved like me, betrayed us, led soldiers to our land, killed our people. Her eyes bore into him, unyielding. That debt doesn't live on paper. It passes, living to living. You pulled me from the water. Now it's yours. Burt's throat tightened. The river growled behind them, its current stronger than the day he'd saved her. He saw his father's face again, the cost of doing right in a land that didn't care. "What debt?" he rasped. She didn't answer, only turned her gaze back to the scarred tree, its wounds older than either of them. The feather by the well seemed heavier now, a sign of something vast, unstoppable, tying him to a past he hadn't written. The town's eyes were on him, and the river kept roaring, waiting. The Arkansas River's growl faded into the dawn, but its threat lingered in Burt Delaney's bones as he stood, staring at the lightning-scarred cottonwood. Ayana's words, debt, blood, betrayal, hung heavy, like smoke over a smoldering campfire. The eagle feather by the well glinted under the rising sun, a silent warning of a past he couldn't outride. In the days that followed, the air around Burt's ranch turned thick with omens. By the 7th morning, a second feather appeared, lashed to a fence post, its black-tipped quill pointing toward the river. His cattle, once sturdy, now shied at shadows, their lowing sharp with unease. At night, the wind carried whispers, not voices, but something older, like the land itself muttering secrets. Burt's dreams grew jagged, his father's blood-soaked shirt, a faceless soldier laughing, and always Ayana's eyes, watching from 30 feet away. He woke each time with his Colt's grip imprinted on his palm, the hammer half-cocked. The town of Redstone wasn't blind to it. At the saloon, men hunched over whiskey, their talk turning dark. "She's cursing your land, Delaney," growled Henry Clarkson, his tobacco-stained fingers jabbing the air. "Apache doesn't trail a man for sport." Burt drained his glass, the burn steadying him. "She ain't hurt nobody," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Mrs. Patterson, wiping down her store counter, lowered her voice. "My cousin's man lived near their kind. Save an Apache, and you're tethered. Debts, enemies, all theirs become yours." Her eyes flicked to the door where Ayana stood, 30 feet from Burt, a silhouette against the dusty street. He tried shaking her, rode hard to the foothills, weaving through sagebrush and scree, but she followed, her moccasins silent, always that cursed distance behind. At the river's bend, he spun his mare, shouting, "What do you want?" Her answer was a tilt of her head, a gesture toward the cottonwood scars, as if the tree could speak what she wouldn't. Frustration boiled over. Burt charged toward her, boots pounding earth, but she melted back, swift as a coyote, keeping the invisible rope taut. His chest heaved. "I ain't your keeper," he roared. Her gaze didn't waver, steady as a blade. The signs grew bolder. On the 10th night, 3 feathers lay crossed on his porch, their quills gleaming like polished bone. A calf went missing, its tracks vanishing at the riverbank. Redstone's whispers turned to shouts. At the blacksmith's, a rancher spat. "Your girl's stirring something, Burt. My well's half dry." A child's fever, a busted wagon axle, every misfortune now bore Ayana's shadow. Burt's sleep dwindled, his father's death replaying. The mob's roar, the gunshot, the lesson that justice out here was a fool's bet. He sought answers at the river, where the cottonwood loomed, its carved marks deeper in the noon light. Kneeling, Burt traced the grooves, names, dates, jagged as wounds. One read M. Santos, 1847. His gut twisted. His grandfather's tales, half forgotten, spoke of a Mexican woman pulled from this very river, nursed back to life. Was this the death's route? Ayana appeared, 30 feet off, her presence a weight. "Who's Maria Santos?" Burt demanded. She stepped forward, once, twice, then stopped, the gap narrowing to 25 feet, a breach that sent a chill through him. "She was meant to die," Ayana said, voice low as distant thunder. "Your kin changed that. Now you carry what he started." That night, Redstone snapped. A family's well ran dry, their crops wilting. A boy, barely 10, broke his arm when a spooked horse bolted. Henry Clarkson stormed Burt's ranch, torch in hand, a dozen men at his back, their faces hard as flint. "Your Apache's bleeding us," he bellowed, firelight glinting off his rifle. Burt stood on his porch, Colt at his hip, heart pounding like a war drum. "She's done nothing," he said, but the mob's eyes burned with fear, the kind that birthed nooses. Ayana emerged from the dark, 30 feet behind him, her buckskin dress catching the torch glow. The crowd stilled, then surged, voices baying for blood. She moved, fast, deliberate, crossing the invisible line, stopping 10 feet from Burt, her breath visible in the cold. "You want this ended?" she said, loud enough for all to hear. "He saves me again. Real danger. You watch. Debt breaks, or I die." Her eyes locked on Burt's, unyielding. Tomorrow, the river's whirlpool, before the sun's high. Henry sneered, but the crowd wavered, caught by her defiance. Burt's pulse thundered. The river waited, and with it, a choice he couldn't unmake. The river's promise of judgment loomed as Ayana's words, "Save her or let her die," cut through the torchlit night. Burt Delaney's pulse hammered, the mob's rifles glinting like wolves' eyes. Her challenge hung in the air, a spark ready to ignite Redstone's fear into chaos. Under a sky black as gunpowder, Burt grabbed Ayana's arm, ignoring her flinch, and pulled her toward the scrub oak at the ranch's edge. "Move!" he hissed, his voice low but sharp. The mob's shouts, Henry Clarkson's bellow loudest, chased them, boots thudding on dry earth. Burt knew these hills, carved by deer trails and flash floods, but tonight they felt alive, branches snagging his coat like bony fingers. Ayana followed, her steps eerily silent, yet always 30 feet back, a shadow tethered by that invisible rope. He glanced over his shoulder. Her buckskin dress flickered in the moonlight, her eyes locked on him, unreadable but urgent. They wove through sagebrush, the air thick with dust and the tang of pine. Torches bobbed behind, their glow licking the horizon. Burt led her down a ravine, loose shale skittering underfoot, to a deer path he'd hunted since boyhood. His father's voice echoed in his skull. "Know the land, son, or it'll bury you." The same land that drank his father's blood in '65 now held their lives. A rifle cracked, the shot wild, splintering a juniper. "Delaney!" Henry roared. "Bring her out, or we burn your damn ranch!" Burt's jaw clenched. He'd seen mobs turn men into monsters. His father's grave proved it. At a fork, Ayana veered left, toward a limestone outcrop overlooking the valley. Burt followed, trusting her instinct. They crouched behind a boulder, the town's lights glinting below, his ranch a warm speck in the dark. The mob's torches swarmed closer, their curses carried by the wind. "Why do they call you a witch?" Burt whispered, his breath clouding in the chill. Ayana's gaze stayed on the valley. "I know things," she said, voice steady as stone. "Plants that heal, clouds that warn, streams that run clean. Whites fear what they can't name." Her words were a mirror to the town's panic, the same blind dread that killed his father for daring to stand tall. She shifted, pointing to his ranch's faint glow. "I follow you to keep the debt from growing. Every step you take, touching that tree, the well, tightens it. If it binds us forever, your kin will owe mine until one line ends." Burt's chest tightened. "Oh, what?" Her eyes met his, dark as the river's depths. Land, blood, everything. The truth landed like a bullet. His grandfather's act in '47, saving Maria Santos, had birthed this curse, chaining their families across decades. A twig snapped below. Torchlight flared, close now. Burt's hand grazed his colt, but Ayana's voice stopped him. "Run, or they'll hang us both." They bolted, her movements fluid, like a hawk skimming the earth, always 30 feet behind. The outcrop's edge dropped to a shale slide, treacherous but hidden. Burt took it, stones cutting his palms, and Ayana followed, her silhouette a ghost in the dark. If this story's pulling you in, hit that subscribe button. It keeps these tales alive, and I'd love to know your town in the comments. Let's keep riding this trail together. At a rocky ledge, they stopped, lungs burning. Below, Redstone's anger churned. Torches circled his barn, a window's glass shattering under a thrown rock. Henry's voice rose, raw with hate. "Delaney's shielding a curse." Burt's fists balled. His ranch, his father's legacy, was crumbling, just as Ayana had warned. "They'll destroy it," he muttered. She nodded, her face half lit by moonlight. "Because they think I'm the debt's end. But it's you they'll break." Her words stung, echoing his father's fate. A man crushed for doing right. Despair clawed at him. The mob's fire crept toward his hayloft, flames licking the night. "I should have let you go," he said, voice rough. Ayana stepped closer, 20 feet now, another breach. "You didn't choose this," she said, "but running won't end it." She pointed to the river, its distant roar a call. "Face them, let me speak, or the debt takes us both." Her resolve was iron, but her eyes held something new. Fear, not for herself, but for him. Burt saw his father's face, the cost of standing still. "Then we go down," he said, gripping his colt. "Together." Burt Delaney's grip on his colt tightened, his resolve forged in the shadow of his father's ghost. Ayana's call to face the mob echoed like a distant church bell, pulling him toward the river's judgment. The night's cold bit his skin as they descended the shale slope, her steps 20 feet behind, no longer bound by the rigid 30-foot chain, but still tethered by something unspoken. The valley opened before them, Redstone's rage a constellation of torches circling Burt's ranch. Smoke curled from the barn's splintered roof, the mob's work staining the air with ash. Burt's boots hit flat ground, and he strode toward the chaos, Ayana's presence a steady weight at his back. The crowd parted as he emerged from the dark, their faces, neighbors, men he'd shared whiskey with, twisted by fear. Henry Clarkson stood at the fore, rifle raised, his eyes glinting like a rattler's. "Delaney," he spat, voice thick with venom. "Step aside or you're as cursed as her." Burt planted himself, the colt heavy at his hip. "She ain't a witch," he said, voice steady as iron. "She's bound by her people's law, same as we got ours." The mob stirred, murmurs rippling like wind through sagebrush. Mrs. Patterson clutched her shawl, her torch casting jagged shadows. "Then why's our wells dry? Why's my boy hurt?" Her words carried the town's pain, each loss pinned to Ayana's silent vigil. Ayana stepped forward, closing the gap to 10 feet, her buckskin dress catching the firelight like a blade's edge. The crowd froze, rifles twitching. "You want this done?" she said, her voice clear, cutting through the night's din. "Burt saves me again. Tomorrow, at the river's whirlpool. You'll all see." Her eyes swept the mob, daring them to challenge her. "The debt breaks, or I die. Your choice." Henry's lip curled, but doubt flickered in his men's faces, their anger snagged on her defiance. Burt's pulse thundered. The river, its roar faint but ever present, loomed in his mind, a beast waiting to test him. "And if I don't?" he asked, low enough for only her to hear. Ayana's gaze met his, unyielding. "Then the debt binds your kin forever. Land, blood, all of it." Her words were a noose, tightening with every breath. He saw his ranch, his father's dream, crumbling under a curse he hadn't chosen. Henry lowered his rifle an inch. "Talk's cheap, girl. How's this not some Apache trick?" Ayana didn't blink. "My father, Joseph Running Bear, will witness. He's a medicine man. His word binds our clan." She paused, letting the name sink in. "You'll see the debt break, or you'll see me gone." The crowd shifted, some lowering their weapons, caught by the promise of an end. Mrs. Patterson's voice broke the silence. "And if he fails?" "What then?" Burt answered before Ayana could. "He won't." The words surprised him, born of a stubborn fire he hadn't felt since his father's death. The mob's eyes bored into him, but he held his ground. The river's distant growl a challenge he couldn't dodge. Ayana nodded, a flicker of something, trust maybe, crossing her face. "Dawn," she said, "before the sun's high, bring your guns. Watch." Henry spat into the dirt. "We'll be there, and if this goes south, Delaney, you're done in Redstone." He turned, waving his men back, their torches retreating like dying stars. The barn smoldered, its timbers cracked, but standing. Burt's chest ached, not for the damage, but for the weight of what lay ahead. He turned to Ayana, her silhouette sharp against the fading firelight. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. Her eyes held his, steady as the North Star. "The river decides. It always has." She stepped back, the gap widening to 20 feet, then 30, as if the night had reset their strange dance. Burt watched her fade into the dark, the river's call louder now, pulling him toward a dawn he couldn't outrun. His father's voice whispered, "Stand, or you're nothing." The Colt felt heavier, the ranch smaller, and the scars of 47, Maria Santos, the debt's first spark, loomed larger than ever. Tomorrow, the whirlpool would speak, and Burt would answer, whether he was ready or not. The river's call grew louder, a relentless summons that drowned out the fading embers of Redstone's torches. Burt Delaney stood alone in the pre-dawn chill, the weight of Ayana's words, "The river decides," carved into his bones like a brand. His ranch, scarred but standing, lay quiet behind him as he faced the Arkansas's dark promise. Dawn broke gray and raw over Colorado's frontier in 1878, the river's surface a churn of foam and shadow, swollen by mountain snowmelt. Burt reached the whirlpool's edge, where smooth stones still formed Ayana's spiral, half submerged, but unbroken. The town gathered on the bank, Henry Clarson's scowl sharp as a bowie knife, Mrs. Patterson's shawl tight against the wind, a few soldiers from the nearby fort standing grim-faced. Joseph Running Bear arrived last, his tall frame draped in Apache beadwork, silver streaks glinting in his hair. He carried a leather pouch, his eyes scanning Burt with a weight that felt like judgment. "You're Ezra's grandson," he said, voice deep as the river's undertow. "This ends today." Ayana appeared, stepping through the mist, her buckskin dress traded for a simple linen shift, light enough for the water's grip. She stopped beside her father, no longer bound by 30 feet, her presence close enough to stir the air. "The current's stronger than before," she said, eyes on the whirlpool's churn. "It has to be real." Joseph knelt, placing 4 eagle feathers in a cross on the earth, their quills catching the first sunlight. "4 generations," he intoned. "Maria Santos, her daughter, my wife, my child. The debt dies with this act." His words carried a ceremonial weight, binding both worlds watching. Burt's throat tightened. The river's roar was a beast, hungrier than the day he'd pulled Ayana free. "There's got to be another way," he said, voice rough. Ayana shook her head, her gaze steady as granite. "Balance demands risk. Apache law. Your law. Both need proof." She shed her moccasins, bare feet pale against the stones. "Count to 10 when I go under. No more." Joseph began a low chant, words Burt couldn't grasp, but felt in his marrow, like the land itself was listening. Ayana stepped into the shallows, the current tugging her shift. She turned, meeting Burt's eyes, a flicker of something. Resolve, not fear, passing between them. "After this we choose," she said, soft but firm. Then she dove, the whirlpool swallowing her in a heartbeat. Burt counted, each second a hammer blow. 1, 2. The crowd leaned forward, Henry's rifle half raised, suspicion etched deep. 5. Ayana's head broke the surface, then vanished again, pulled deep. 7. Burt's boots edged closer, the river's cold spray stinging his face. 9. She didn't rise. His heart lurched. He leapt. The water hit like a sledge, icy claws ripping the breath from his lungs. The current dragged at his boots, his coat, a force bent on claiming them both. He kicked hard, eyes burning in the murk, catching a flash of her hair tangled near a sunken log. She thrashed, weaker now, the whirlpool's grip tightening. Burt lunged, arm hooking her waist, her body limp against his. The river fought back, slamming them against rocks, but he clawed for the surface, legs burning, air gone. His father's face flashed. "Stand, or you're nothing!" And he kicked again, breaking free. They hit the bank, Burt dragging Ayana onto the grass, both gasping, soaked to the bone. She coughed, water spilling from her lips, her eyes wide with the raw edge of survival. Joseph knelt beside her, hands checking her pulse, then looked at Burt, a nod of hard-earned respect. "The debt is paid," he declared, voice carrying over the crowd's hush. He tossed the feathers into the current, their quills spinning away, lost to the river's hunger. Henry shifted, rifle lowering. "It's done?" he muttered, half disbelieving. Joseph's gaze was steel. "She's free. So is he." Ayana rose, trembling but unbroken, and stepped toward Burt, close enough for him to see the gold flecks in her eyes. "No more following," she said, voice raw. "If I stay, it's my choice." Her hand brushed his, a fleeting warmth, then she turned to the crowd. "I'll build a home, on the hill above his ranch, not yours to decide." The townsfolk dispersed, their fear fading into the dawn, leaving only the river's endless song. Burt watched Ayana's silhouette against the rising sun, knowing the debt was gone. But something new, chosen, not cursed, had taken its place. What did you feel when Burt and Ayana broke the river's curse? Share your thoughts below. Did her choice to stay spark hope or stir unease? Your comments fuel these tales, and I'm grateful for every one of you riding this trail with me. Let's meet again soon for another story, where the frontier tests the heart. If you're craving more of Redstone's secrets, drop a hint in the comments. See you at the next campfire.